Welcome to the Swine Health Black Belt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name is Dr. Clayton Johnson, your host for today's episode, and I am joined in our podcast studios today by Dr. Sarah Probst Miller. Dr. Sarah is a veterinarian. She's also the president and creative director of AgCreate Solutions. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I know many folks out there in the industry know you already, but for those who haven't met you, please give everybody an introduction.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's great to be here, Dr. Johnson. Yeah, I am a pig veterinarian by trade. I spent a decade in more traditional swine practice, and about 12 years ago, started my own company, AgCreate Solutions, to focus on how to change behavior in humans, right? How do we reach the heads and hearts of people in a way that they offer great care to pigs? And that's really what AgCreate Solutions started its focus on, and now we also do training for the dairy industry, the cattle industry, salmon, tilapia, and it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm super glad to be here today.
Sarah, people always think that their industry is very unique, right? And it's very special. And other people just don't understand how unique and different ours is. But you've got experience trying to influence people and train people in different industries. Is there anything unique about teaching people about pig production and the things we do? Is it the same thing in the dairy world and all the other industries that are out there? Or is it truly unique that the pig training needs to be very specific?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because some of the animals I get to interact with have fins and others have fur, but it's people everywhere, right? And when we look at the human species, the science of how adults learn can be extrapolated across all people who are called to work with animals. And I think that is something that is special about the pig industry, is that there are companies that do that well, recruiting people to a profession and helping them in their work with pigs every day, allow them to express what is, I think, for some folks, a calling.
Very cool. Sarah, you came up with an awesome title for today's episode. We're definitely going to win the Title of the Year award, Sow Livability and Dancing. And you're going to tie all those topics together for us. So I want to give you the floor. Tell us what you want to talk about. What is it with composting and sow livability and dancing that makes you excited to talk about it?
Well, are you by chance a dancer, Dr. Johnson? Do you dance ever?
Not that I will admit to.
Okay.
Occasionally, perhaps on late night at the ASV annual meeting, maybe I'll hit the dance floor for a minute or two.
All right. Well, I grew up on a pig farm in central Illinois. And when I was a little girl, my second grade teacher asked me, Sarah, what do you want to be when you grow up? Why don't you draw a picture? And so I drew a picture of myself as a pig farmer with a pitchfork and a tutu, because when I grew up, I was going to be a pig farmer and a part-time ballerina. And I used to follow my dad around the farm. And one thing about our gestation barn is that the hallway was modern for the times because it was really wide, right? Now we're building barns with wider hallways to offer great handling for animals, but our gestation hallway was perfect for practicing my dance moves, because if I was going to be a great ballerina someday, I had to make sure that my sachet turgite was just right, and the sows were just a very forgiving audience. And so it was a great place to practice those very physical movements, right? Unfortunately, there's not a huge market for 6-foot ballerinas. However, so I did switch my career goal at a certain point in my childhood. They don't make size 11 ballet shoes. However, one thing that is important, when you're learning something physical like dancing, is that you have to get out and move. Like, you have to get out and try. Sometimes watching other people do those tasks is an important part of that learning, right? I remember my ballet instructor, Barb, was so gifted at moving her body in very graceful ways, very beautiful ways. And, we, as students, we would watch her first before we would attempt doing it. And as humans, no matter what physical movement we're getting ready to undertake, whether that be, moving pigs to composting or working with sows to improve their livability, It's a physical task. And so often when we bring people to the barns and we ask them to do things, we forget that we're creating a physical competency for those people. And we would never expect a dancer to look at an SOP and know how to move their body, right? We would expect a progression of viewing the movements, of maybe doing the movements with a mentor, and then having the opportunity to display how well they're able to do the movements before we would call them a competent dancer that we would want to invite to the stage or invite to perform. And so I think that's one of the most important things when we think about the science of how adults learn, and the fact that we as leaders in the pork industry are working with people that need to learn how to do things day in and day out in a way that we trust that they're getting done, not just today, but also tomorrow. We have to remember that part of the science of how adults learn.
You know what they say, right? Show, tell, do, assist, observe, right? There's a whole pathway there that we have to help people learn with. What are the skills on the farm, Sarah, that you think are most important to take that dancing type approach to teaching? Are there some things that fit better for an SOP, and it's okay to just have a written SOP and that's the only way to learn? And there are some other things where throw away the SOP. It's much more physical, kinesthetic, however you want to describe it, right? But it's more hands-on and practice. That's the only way to learn those tasks.
Yeah, I like to encourage leaders to simplify it, to see it, do it, teach it. Right. And I believe it really needs to become a culture for us on farm. And it is a part, I believe, of living the culture of care, not just for pigs, but for people. And so for every competency on farm that we want to create, every leader needs to start with the idea that I need to almost immunize that person's brain by first allowing them to see the opportunity, either in a video or a live demonstration. And just by seeing it, the person starts to imagine themselves doing that task. And there's good science to show that seeing something in a calm environment actually sets that person up for good learning. One thing that is also important at the beginning of learning that's kind of cool about how humans learn, that's good for managers to know, is that certain hormones and chemicals have to be present in the brain for new electrical connections to form from one side of the brain to the other, right? And one of those hormones is adrenaline, right? And as humans who work with animals, we know that the hormone adrenaline can be dangerous, right? Because when adrenaline's at the right level, humans sort of lean forward and they're like ready. They're engaged. They're kind of excited. They're maybe envisioning themselves. But when adrenaline gets too high, we know that mammals are going to fight, they're going to run away, or they're going to freeze and play dead. And that is not neither of those things. Neither of those three things are good for learning. In fact, it makes learning impossible. So maybe even if we back up as leaders in the pork industry and we know that how people feel is going to impact whether or not they're able to learn. Strong emotions like anger, resentment, too much excitement, depression. Those emotions, those very human, very real emotions can disable a human's brain from being able to form new connections. So one of the first things a good leader needs to do is to check in with their people and make sure they're in a receptive state. Then start going through a see it experience of showing them the task. Where I think SOPs are very valuable is that after showing and demonstrating or showing a video or something like that, is that you can take the SOP with you to the barn with that person for a mentoring experience and use the SOP as a guideline, as a mentor for the person that you're working with in the barn to make sure that you're covering all the competencies that you showed them earlier in a way that allows them the opportunity to go through those tasks in a systemic way, right?
Very good. Sarah, thank you for all that you've done to help educate pig producers throughout your career, from the time you were practicing your dance moves to now creating audio visual learning tools for folks all throughout the pork industry. Can't thank you enough for that. To all of our folks in the audience, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you listening to the Swine Health Black Belt podcast. If you haven't been to our website or subscribed, please go ahead and do so, swinehealthblackbelt.com. And we put out new episodes every Friday, so make sure to subscribe so that you can see them. For Dr. Sarah Probst Miller, I'm Dr. Clayton Johnson. Thank you very much for joining us today, and please have a great rest of your day. Hey, everyone. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health-related research trial and would like to come on the show to talk about it with me and share it with our audience, feel free to send an email to healthblackbelt@swineit.com, and we would love to take a look at your research.